Okay, we'll go ahead and turn our attention to Stephen Covey. I would remind you, uh, I've said this several times in class. So I don't know why people aren't always why in the other class they also miss this. But remember, the last sentence in your critique sheet says that you're expected to have a couple of multiple choice questions. And just review those real quickly with us. Give us the right answer. You don't have to talk a lot about them. But it's also earlier in the critique sheet. It talks about getting, having some feedback from people and so forth. And you don't have a lot of time. And frankly, students aren't real interactive many times. But that's one way to do it is actually use your multiple choice questions as a way to gain interaction. You might even spread them through throughout your PowerPoint and not have them at the end. Each person, as they complete their presentation, have one or two questions right then before they turn it over to somebody else. So that's a way of creating more interaction. But that's up to you and how you want to do it. But that is part of the critique sheet is to have a few questions. It doesn't really say how many, but I would expect at least one per team member, at least that. Okay, so habit 5 is to seek first to understand and then be understood. One of the we're going to watch several of Dr. Covey's videos during class, so you won't have to watch them out of class. And he does obviously a fairly good job of explaining his own principles. So it's sometimes better just to listen to his videos than to have me try to replicate them more or less. But we talked about last week how these 3 habits that relate to gaining interdependence are intertwined. Think win-win, as he explained in one of his videos last week, is kind of you might say, the philosophy behind achieving greater interdependence. It's the belief that both sides can win, that there's plenty of abundance. That's habit 4. Habit 5, in seeking first to understand, then be understood, is one of the key methods for how to achieve success. In that, in order to achieve a win-win situation, very frequently you need to understand each other, and you need to understand what each side wants to achieve out of their interaction, whether it's in a family, whether it's in a business negotiation, whatever it is. If somebody's not happy in a marriage, if the other spouse does not care and does not try to understand the spouse is not happy, it's likely to end up unhappily, unsuccessfully. And obviously the same in a business negotiation. If you're negotiating with somebody and you don't understand what they want and they don't understand what you want, then your odds of being able to come to a win-win negotiation is very unlikely. Now, part of the next habit is to achieve synergy. And one of the main ways of achieving synergy is, so that's kind of the ultimate goal is synergy. The way to achieve synergy is through understanding each other, and not just understanding each other, but then taking one more step. And if both sides don't win automatically with what they're doing, then it's seeking the third alternative. The third alternative being the results of brainstorming, if you want to call it that. It's the synergy that you can achieve by sitting down with other people and sharing your ideas and coming up with something that neither one of you thought of before. And that's the power of these 3 habits in achieving interpersonal success, is to ultimately come up with solutions, come up with ideas, and so forth that you would not have done if you had not worked together. And so ultimately that allows, one of the ideas I think we talked about last week is those who do not have an abundance mentality, those who do not think win-win, think there's always so much of the pie. And if I give you any of the pie, I don't have as much. Therefore, automatically, I don't win as big if I give you any of the pie. But the idea between synergy is 1 + 1 = 3. It's bigger. The whole is greater than the sum. And in other words, your pie gets bigger. You come up with ideas you didn't have before, solutions you did not have before, new revenue sources if it's a business that you didn't have before. And so your pie becomes bigger, and therefore you're not losing anything. You may actually be gaining something even after you've shared it with somebody else, because now your pie is bigger. And so that's the power of synergy, is to believe that your pie can be bigger, so to speak. And so anyway, so all three of them mesh together. The basic philosophy, win-win, there's enough for everybody. The basic method is seek first to understand, then to be understood, so you communicate effectively. And the third is to achieve synergy by not just understanding each other, but now brainstorming and helping each other to come up with a bigger pie, so to speak. When you don't understand each other, you may get into a win-lose situation like Ed did when he decided to put his foot down around the house and tell people what he expected. A friend of mine was a cartoonist, so he made this one for me. Maybe he thinks I'm Ed. I don't know. So we have a number of videos we're going to watch today. They're all very short, or most of them are short. There's one longer one. Yeah, okay. There's one longer one. But so we plan to watch at least the first 4 in class instead of just listening to me. And maybe the first 5, actually. The 5th one kind of makes a transition into a part of this, of how to make the pie bigger, so to speak, is innovative thinking and understanding. One of the keys in sales, for example, and you see I have a bunch of really short videos, 1, 2 minutes, a couple of 1 or 2, I guess 3 minutes about sales. You say, is this a sales class? I didn't sign up for a sales class. Basically, we're all salesmen at some time or another. You may have to be a salesperson to get married. You may have to sell yourself to a spouse, but you definitely have to sell yourself to get a job. And understanding the basic nature of sales is helpful. And one of the things that this sales consultant explains is that one of the keys to successful sales is asking questions. In other words, part of it is to understand what the other person needs. Now, he may also suggest some that may be kind of a little bit on the edge as far as whether they're manipulative or not. But by and large, he tries to make sales simple by making sure that you understand the other person. And I'll talk about that a little bit from some of my own experiences in sales, because frankly, I do not like sales. And so the only way that I could double my revenue for my first newspaper I bought was making sales as simple as possible and as easy as possible. No hard selling. I'm not a hard salesman. I'm not one of those that tries to force somebody to accept my proposal. To the contrary, I try to make it so inviting that they can't resist it. And so I'm always looking for that factor of giving myself an edge over any of the competition, to where the person I'm selling to can look at what I'm offering and say, yeah, that makes sense. And I don't have to be a good salesman, basically. So I'll talk a little bit about that too as we talk about sales, because that then gets into my approach, and also Clayton Christensen's discussion on selling a milkshake will maybe help you also see that you may be a salesperson someday. I never, ever, ever expected that I would have to sell anything, because that's not my personality type. The last thing I want to do is be a hard-nosed salesman and depend on sales. But somehow, when I bought my first newspaper, I doubled its revenue in 1 year. And so I found out, guess what? You don't have to be a hard-nosed, manipulative salesperson to tell. And otherwise, I would not have succeeded. So anyway, those will, in fact, maybe I will, right off the bat, we'll watch these videos, and then we'll come back and discuss them. So let's do that. So I'm going to pause my video. Talk a little bit about those videos we watched already. Notes myself. So what do you think it means when they talk about, what does it mean when he talked about psychological error? What was his point he was making about psychological error? You remember? Well, the first things he talked about. Turn this way. Okay, so this is directional. So when I'm over here, I think it will hear me. So what's psychological error? Well, what was his point with psychological error? What was he talking about? Do you remember? You have the right to it? Okay, that's kind of it. Basically, it's to be understood, period. Okay, that there's a psychological need to be understood. And those that do not feel understood, it's like not being able to breathe, but it's a psychological way. And if we want a good relationship with somebody, we have to help them understand, help them feel like we understand them. And that's through some of the techniques he's talking. It's not really, and he doesn't want us to say it's the technique. There are techniques for making people think that you understand them. And so you have to be very careful, because if somebody, sometimes you'll see this on movies and stuff where people will express that they feel like they're being manipulated when somebody says, oh, I understand how you feel, sort of thing, and then the person is offended because they feel like they're trying to manipulate them. And so it has to be sincere in order to be effective. You have to really seek to understand. You have to be truly empathetic, not manipulative. And the difference between the two is somewhat slim in what you're actually doing, but it's not small in its reality. It's big in its reality. In other words, you have to be sincere. For it to work, you have to be sincere. If you're not sincere, then they will detect that you're being false, you're being manipulative. And so that can be even worse than not even pretending. They have to believe you're sincere. It doesn't work. He told the story about the man who said, I don't understand my son. And we're so into that. I mean, the guy didn't even understand. Dr. Covey repeated what he said several times, and he still didn't get it. How can your son understand you because you don't listen to him? Duh. I don't understand my son. He doesn't listen to me. Well, that's not how you understand. Is to be listened to. You understand by shutting up and listening to them. That's how you understand. And yet, as simple as that seems, and as stupid as the father seems to us now in retrospect, isn't that what we do all the time? Don't we do that a lot? I don't understand my son. He doesn't listen to me. We do that in some way on a regular basis. If we don't understand this principle, we will be that dad. So when somebody, of course, I presume none of you are parents. Maybe anybody have a parent here? I presume not. But when you become a parent, you invest a lot into your children, and you want the best for them. It's not that you don't want the best for them, you do. Although sometimes it can be a little bit selfish. If you remember early on, I was talking to you about Dr. Covey's son and how he had a son who was not coordinated, didn't seem to pay attention in school, didn't seem very smart. He was, when he played baseball, he'd swing the bat before the ball even got to him, stuff like that. And they tried to accept him. But they were embarrassed by him. And so, the first response is how to make him better. And then ultimately, if you recall, he remembered that accidental study in England where the children, when they switched the grades on the children, and once they switched the grades by mistake, suddenly the stupid kids became smarter, and the smarter kids became stupider, because somehow the kids they felt, the smart kids suddenly felt stupider, and the stupid kids suddenly felt smarter, and they responded to it. It seems impossible, and yet that was a real story. That really did happen. And so the idea of really understanding somebody and really accepting them and being open to what they're thinking and so forth is not always easy, even for somebody as smart as Dr. Covey. It can be a challenge. And as parents, this whole idea in America, they talk a lot about living through your children, because you have parents who sign their kids up for everything. And he's going to take ballet, and he's going to play football, and he's going to take piano, and they're trying to kind of live through their children, having them do all this stuff. And even if their kids in some cases don't want to do that stuff, but their parents want them to, because that's how they achieve their self-identity through their children. So you have to be careful of that, and be careful of reflecting somehow. One of the questions I asked in my last class with the other section, I just kind of thought about it as we were starting to talk, was, what do you think is harder, to communicate in the family or in the business? What do you think is harder, to achieve this in the family or in a business situation? What do you think? You're ready to talk? You're ready to talk, so you want to talk. What do you think? Family? I think we all know that, don't we? Why would that be? We know people in our family. Why would this communication be harder in a family than in a business situation? It seems kind of odd, doesn't it? It seems like it should be the opposite. I think we all know instinctively it's not. There was no question in the last section either. That was the first answer, and everybody agreed. It's harder in the family. And I really don't have a good answer why that's true. We expect people to understand us, and when they don't, then we get somewhat exasperated or something, or I don't know. I'm not sure, but I do know that the natural response, if a child comes to you and the child says, I am so sick of school, I'm going to drop out, I'm going to become a mechanic. The natural response to the parent is, are you an idiot? We paid all this money to get you a good schooling, and you can't have a future by becoming a mechanic. You need to go to university, and you need to get this degree, and you need to look for a job, and how are you taking your family? Right? You guys aren't parents yet, but that's how you're going to naturally respond when you're a parent if you're not careful. Instead of saying, reflecting his emotion, wow, you're really upset about something. What's going on? And just listening. And listening empathetically to understand why he's feeling the way he is. And then after a while, as he said, after you've listened and after that person feels understood, what do you suppose the natural response of the child is once you've listened thoroughly? What do you think the end of it? Once he feels totally understood, you've listened and You've felt his frustration. What's the child going to do then? What do you think? Do you think he's going to want some advice once he's understood? Not before then, but now he is kind of stuck, and so now he feels totally understood. You understand his frustration. He feels that you understand him. But even though, he probably isn't settled on what he really wants to do. He kind of had a preliminary plan to become a mechanic. But at some point, once he feels understood, he's probably going to say, "What do you think, Dad?" Because he doesn't really know. So now he feels understood. He's relieved of some of this frustration. You haven't yelled at him. You haven't given him your opinion, but you've listened. And at some point, he's going to ask, "What do you think?" And maybe you still don't tell him what you think. Maybe at that point is when you start asking questions and make him think a little bit. So, well, son, I don't know. Do you think you can make a good enough living to have a family? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to get married? What do you think? And let the son think about it a second. And and it's not necessarily bad to be a mechanic. Mechanics in America anyway can make you really good money. That's not necessarily the bad decision, totally. But even becoming a mechanic, how do you get there? How do you become a top mechanic and make enough money to take care of the family? And so in brainstorming with the son, it might be that he has, that you can come up together, the next habit, synergy, seeking the third alternative. It may be that together you can find that solution. Indeed, he really does love mechanics. He really does want to be a mechanic. And you look at the options of how he can be a top-notch mechanic and make a good living and take care of a family and achieve all of his dreams. And that may be the third alternative, is what stepping stones are required to get there. Or it may be that he'll realize, I can't really do what I want that way, can I? But I'm so frustrated at school. And then maybe your response is, well, is there something that you can do or we can help you do that would remove some of the frustration at school? And maybe it's not so much leaving school. What is it, maybe the answer is something else, but what is it? Maybe you brainstorm some more. Once you've understood what's frustrating him, now it's time to brainstorm some more and try to find a solution to why my son ended up changing schools. He didn't feel that he had not done as well as he should have in the school he was at. Didn't take it. He was very smart. On a nationalized test, he had some of the highest scores, but he wasn't always focused. He's still not always focused. But he felt one thing was that part of holding him back was just kind of everybody, saw him in the light of being the goof off or whatever. And so he just wanted to change schools, and so we allowed him to change schools. And I think it helped a little bit. Although he still has some bad habits, frankly. Even now, he has some bad habits. He's over 40 years old and he's got bad habits. There's some things you can't do for your children, which is sad. You'd like to, but you can't. They do have to make decisions. They won't, especially when they're 40 years old, they're not going to do exactly what you want them to do. And it's even hard when they're 20. So you may feel like you have the answers for them, but in some cases, all you can do is just love them and let them know that you accept them as they are. And then now he's doing okay, partly because he married a woman who makes twice as much money as he does. So that helps. But anyway, so it can be, but now going back to the business situation, he talked about the realtor who, after trying all of his techniques that his mentor had taught him in real estate, he was failing until he said, "Well, what the heck? I might as well try Dr. Covey's. I don't think it'll work, but what do I have to lose? I'm about to lose. They brought in another realtor. I'm about to lose the sale. Might as well try it." And all he did was just listen for a while and, 15, 20 minutes, ask questions, reflect what the person wanted. And once that person, felt understood, then he didn't have to sell. He didn't need any of those other techniques, because what the person really wanted to know is whether this realtor understood and cared about what his needs were. And once he felt the realtor understood what he wanted and maybe adapted some things because of that, because he didn't really go into a lot of detail, but maybe once he did understand, he could come up with some third alternative aspect to the deal, then suddenly the guy was ready to go. And as he said, it was not the basic deal that was the problem. It was the fact that the guy wanted to be understood, wanted psychologically to feel like the realtor gave a darn, that he cared and that he understood and that he was looking out after his best interest. And once he felt understood, even if the deal wasn't changed that much, he said he was ready to go forward. So it's in some ways easier in business, except still most people don't do it. Most people in sales, that's kind of part of what Dr. Covey has been talking about in sales and in business in general. People are taught techniques, and so they try to implement techniques, and they're false techniques. They're facades. They put on this facade to try to achieve success, and it's actually not as easy to achieve success that way than if you do it Dr. Covey's way. If you actually are real, you're not manipulating somebody. You sincerely want to understand what their needs are. You sincerely want to come up with a third alternative. It's not to say it's not, in some cases, hard work to do it, because you have to put your brain into it. You're not just trying to stick with one solution. Now you're actually having to create. I personally love the creative process. It can be, the word was used in the presentation today, the aha experience. I love that experience. I talked about that before. I love having that feeling where, aha, new light. I understand something I didn't understand before. And that's what you're doing if you implement Dr. Covey's ideas here, that you're looking for ahas in your relationship to other people, in negotiations, in sales. Sales is a way of negotiating, actually. A sale is a negotiation. What is it you want? Would what I have help you achieve what you want? And once you take it more from that approach, you have a need, I have a need. You have a want, I have a want. Can we work together in this and both be happy? That's really what you're doing in a good sales relationship. But too many salespeople don't want to approach it that way. They want to use the technique, right? Oh yeah, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and whatever. They give you their own enthusiasm, energy, woo, and it's a facade. It's a technique, and it might work once, but especially if they actually end up buying something they didn't want, will they come back to you? No. The most important thing in sales is that the person that buys from you likes you and wants to come back and deal with you. And I'll talk about that in a little more in a second. Let's watch this other video, and then I'll kind of share my experience in sales. In a business, the idea is that like a doctor, like a good doctor, you don't want a doctor to prescribe how to heal you until they know what's wrong with you. I've gone to doctors like that. They're so busy, you walk in and you have sniffles, and say, oh, you have a cold, here, do this, and they walk out. They don't know, they never asked about your other symptoms. They presumed that all you had was the cold, but maybe you had other symptoms, like you may have had a nasal infection like I did a few months ago, and that you need antibiotics for that. But if all you have is a cold, then you need some medicine to stop your runny nose or whatever. A totally different treatment. And so if you don't diagnose properly, you can't prescribe properly the solution to it. And so some doctors are kind of like that. But it's also true some salespeople are kind of like that. Some parents are kind of like that. That many of us tend to prescribe a solution to something before we have listened, because diagnosing is listening. Diagnosing a problem is listening to the symptoms, listening to the needs, listening to what concerns the patient before you prescribe a solution to it. Otherwise, it's somebody walks in and you're an eye doctor and they look and they can't see very well, so here, you can just take these glasses. You haven't done anything else, you just hand them a pair of glasses and you presume that your glasses will solve their problem. Well, obviously that doesn't work. And so you need to really do the full diagnosis before you can come up with a solution. Well, jumping ahead real quick because we're running out of time. In the same way that Dr. Christensen needed to understand what the real problem was, in other words, what the real job was, what was it that would solve the problem at McDonald's, was to find out what was going to solve the problem for the customers. So many people doing market studies are studying the customer, but they never bothered to study the job that needs to be done. And that's why he refers to this. He talks a lot about the jobs not done. If you want a new product, find out what job is not being done. That job might be what a physical product will do for you, what a service will do for you. But to find a place for a new business, you're looking for jobs not done, that you have no competitors in, or that you don't have very, very good competitors in it, because nobody's solving the problem who has a job not done. And so you come into the market and you solve that problem. So with Sony, they came into the market, and the first problem they solved was providing a cheap transistor radio that the kids could take with them out in the park with their friends and listen to music without their parents yelling at them. And so that was a whole new market, because the kids couldn't afford they not only could not afford a big vacuum tube radio, but they couldn't take it out to the park with them. It needed electricity, it needed to plug in, so until Sony, started selling these small transistor radios that would run on a battery and so forth, that they could carry in their pocket, nobody was doing the job that the teenagers needed done. And so they came in and did that job, and then they went upscale and they put RCA out of business, because their transistors ultimately got better and better and better, and Sony was stuck on their old product and didn't invest on a new product. And so they knew how to do transistors, but they were making more money off of their vacuum tube products, and so they ignored the new technology and got put out of business by Sony. Anyway, so there is an approach in major, in my area where I was working as a corporate marketing manager, we were talking about doing architectural and engineering consulting that in some cases might end up $1 million in profits, because if you build a project that costs $50 million, the engineers get paid a lot of money for that in designing it. So the Mandeville approach is basically to go in like a doctor. That's what they tell you to do. You go in and you meet with a prospective client and you just go through all the questions like a doctor, what are your needs? What is your goal? What are your concerns? You go then, and the PowerPoint has a lot of questions if you want to go through it and understand it better. But ultimately, the whole thing is to be a doctor. Now, in their case, they say don't give them a solution right away. Because in their case, they say, tell them, that you review with them, just like Dr. Covey suggested, you review what their needs are, what their concerns are. You go and review, make sure you understand everything, give them a chance to give you a response to that and maybe improve your understanding. And then you say, well, what we'd like to do now is, now that we understand, we'd like to set an appointment for next week. And we'd like a week to go back to the experts at our company who are really professionals at handling all the sorts of problems you're talking about. We don't want to just give you a quick, opinion off the top of our heads. We want to go and work on this and bring you back the best solution we can come up with to how to satisfy your needs. And once they've invested their time in you and you've shown an understanding of their problem and you come back with a solution that really addresses all their problems, what are they going to do? They're going to hire you. And so you go in as a doctor and you win a big contract because of that. When I mentioned buying my newspaper. I was 25 when I bought my first publishing company. It was mostly a newspaper, a weekly newspaper, and then we also did books and other printing and publishing as well. Anyway, but my main income was from the newspaper. And I felt like, I may have explained a little bit of this story before, I felt like in a way I was begging for money because the advertisers did not believe that they were getting anything out of the advertising. They believed they wanted a local newspaper, so I was their charity. And I didn't feel like I wanted to be a charity. And also, if I was a charity, they would never increase their charity to me. They were charitably giving me as much money as they wanted to give me. And so I was going to be stuck at this level of income because charity only goes so far. And so as I studied it, and it did require me to study, talk to them, feel what they were feeling. I understood they felt I was a charity. So how do I help them be more successful so I'm not a charity? And as I studied the problem with advertising, what I found was that most people fail in advertising. They fail in advertising because they don't think of a campaign. They think in individual advertising. They don't think like if a politician were to just buy one ad in each newspaper and on each TV station, he would never be elected. We could think in politics, we understand campaigns in politics. It takes a lot of advertising, in all the different media. You're putting advertising every place because you have a major competitor you can see, and he's doing the same thing. You have to fight him, ad for ad, commercial by commercial, and so forth. So we see it that way. We understand that requires a campaign. But most advertisers fail to see it that way. And so just like the ones that were charitably buying ads from me, they did not believe it was doing them any good, but they did not understand what they were doing wrong. And the previous owners had not helped them to understand what they were doing wrong. And what they were doing wrong is they were not waging a campaign. They were just simply supporting a charity. They were not getting good results from it. And so I thought about the situation and I brainstormed internally. I realized that paper and ink was not anywhere close to my most expensive cost in printing a newspaper. It was nowhere. Paper and ink was pretty cheap. My cost was me. My highest cost was me, my time. And I only had 24 hours a day. And I was already working myself to death. I was staying up all night sometimes. So how do I spread myself? Well, one way I could help myself, I figured, was, what if I don't have to sell them every week? What if I don't have to go out and say, oh, please give me some more money. Buy another ad from me. What if I don't have to do that? What if I sell them a contract whereby they agree to buy an ad every week, and I become their consultant. And I go help them do a better job with their advertising. But I don't have to beg them. I don't have to be on the phone all the time. Do you want an ad? 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 I don't have to waste all my time selling when I know they have to, they're obliged by contract to buy an ad from me. Now I can help them be successful. I can concentrate on their needs. I know that they're meeting my needs because they've signed a contract. And so, because paper and ink was not very expensive, I thought, okay, here's my deal. You've been buying this 1/8 page ad occasionally, and you haven't been getting good results. Let's think beyond that. Let's think about a campaign. So I will, if you will buy a year-long contract from me, I will only charge you as if you're buying a 1/8 page ad every week. That's all I'll charge you. But 4 times a year, this is a weekly newspaper, so there's 52 weeks in a year. 4 times a year, I'll give you a full page. It's a broadsheet, it's a big size page. Instead of this little ad down here, you get the whole page 4 times a year. And 4 times a year, at no extra cost, you get a half-page ad like that. 4 times as big as your 8th page ad. And 4 times a year, you get a quarter-page ad, twice as big as the ad you've been buying. And we'll also give you some streamers that go across the bottom, and we'll give you free classified ads where you can, for help wanted or whatever you need those for, the little reader ads. They're just all words. We'll give you all that, and basically, and every week you pay us for a 1/8 page ad. But now you see a bigger picture. Now you're seeing a campaign. 4 times a year. What do I do with a full page ad? This whole big ad, what do I do with that? And what do I do with a half-page ad? I wonder what I could do with that to sell more stuff. And what do I do with these bigger quarter-page ads? And you have them thinking now of how they can be successful by waging a campaign with your assistance. And for some reason, even though I kind of targeted this for those that were just buying an occasional 1/8 page ad, a lot of well, for one thing, I saved time. Now I could go into the big city about 30 miles away. And now, suddenly I had time to go also negotiate a little bit and understand the situation with a big car dealer. And he said, well, how about, and so the big car dealer decided to buy 2 pages a week from me. Well, now that was a lot more money. And I went to a lumber yard that sells lumber and building products. And he said, yeah, definitely, we want a page every week. So now, between my having more time plus being able to negotiate a little bit, think win-win, I suddenly had a whole bunch of big ads. Now my whole newspaper looked more important because now it was twice as big as it used to be. And now other people automatically think, well, this paper is growing, it's bigger, it has all these pages, maybe I should get into it. And so other people buy ads from you because they're obviously successful. He has all these big companies. He has this Ford dealership and they have this lumber company. They're taking big ads on it. Maybe I need to take bigger ads on it. Maybe I take regular ads on it. And so in 1 year, I doubled the revenue by just thinking outside the box and thinking, what do they need? What don't they get now with what they're buying from me? And what can I do to help them? And then what, obviously I was going to help myself too. So that was probably one of the most important things that ever happened in my career, and it happened fairly early in my career, that opened lots of other doors for me. Other jobs, it even led to my becoming a professor at age 30. Because at age 30, I was already a successful professional. I already had owned a newspaper, and I was successful at it. And I was an editor, and I had all this experience behind me. So even with only a master's degree, one of the largest systems of universities in the world, the state of New York's university system hired me with a master's degree at 30 years old because I was a professional. I had this on my resume. I did something that a lot of people had never done before, and it was just doing this sort of stuff that Dr. Covey's talking about. And it changed my life. So anyway, I'll end with that. I just wanted to let you see there's bigger dimensions than this as you think about and ponder it. This is really a key to achieving success in life, in the business world and the executive world or whatever. As you start thinking, how do I sell myself? How do I sell my product? How do I build a business? What Dr. Covey is talking about is really important in achieving success when it comes to interpersonal relationships, whether it's in the family or whether it's in business, um, whatever. It's it really works. It really works. So, okay, thank you.
Very good afternoon to Dr. Ken and all my friends. And today we are going to present about Chapter 3, Thinking About Thought. And I am Feng Lin. And thinking is a very important process in our life, especially in our daily life. And in college, you are expected to think for yourself, to access and evaluate new approaches and ideas. A good thinking skill will then make us become a good problem solver in our college life. Your success in college education and life beyond college is directly linked to becoming a better and complete thinker. But becoming a better and more complete thinker requires mastering some skills and consistent practice. And I will start off with types of thinking. So in total, there are 6 types of thinking. The first one is remembering and recalling, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. For remembering and recalling means that you can repeat an information and ideas from your memory. For example, reading, and then you recall back what you have read. And it is the first and most basic thinking skill you will learn in your life. The second one is understanding. Understanding means that you can interpret and construct meaning from a certain source, such as written, spoken, or from a graphic source. The third one will be applying, which means you can implement the material you have learned in some new situations. And analyzing is breaking down the materials into key elements so that you can understand them. And this will determine how the parts are related to one another. And the mental actions involved in this process, including examining, contrasting, separating, categorizing, experimenting, and deducing. And for evaluating means that you can access or make judgments from a certain source, and you can draw conclusion and ideas from the ideas or information. And when you master this evaluating, you can critique the value and the usefulness of the material or the source. Lastly is creating, which means that putting parts together. After you've broken down all the materials into key elements, and you can put things together and reorganize them into a new form. And this is the most difficult mental action you can perform. And next, I will pass to Jonathan.
Okay, so I will talk about critical thinking. Critical thinking basically is the ability to discover the value of an idea, a self-belief, claim, or an argument. It will requires you to use logic and reasoning thinking to evaluate your evidence or information to make a decision or reach a conclusion. Furthermore, critical thinking is a foundation for effective communication. It's the principal skill used in effective decision making. At the core of creating new knowledge is a way to uncover bias and prejudice. Okay, next, move to critical thinking process. So first step is, what is the problem or issue I'm considering really about? Understanding this is key to success in critical thinking. What is the objective, position, decision? Are you really against a recommendation from your dad, or are you using the issues to establish your independence? So the next one, what are my options? what are the choices that are available for you, or what are the sides you might choose to agree with. In making a decision, it might be helpful to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that might happen in each scenario? Examining different points of view is very important. There may be a dozens of alternative viewpoints to a particular issues, and the validity of each can change depending on circumstances. Remember also that sometimes the best opinion might be a combination of the options you identify initially. Okay, next, what do I know about each opinion? First, you make sure that you have all the information about each option. Do you have all the information to support each of your likely option? What is still missing? Where can you get the information you need? Keep an open mind and don't miss supporting information on any position before you evaluate it carefully. Okay, the last one is, how good is my information? You need to evaluate the strengths and the weakness of each piece of supporting evidence. Are all the relevant facts presented? Are some facts presented in misleading ways? Are enough examples presented to support the premise? Consider the source of the supporting information. Okay, now let's move to the fallacies and the ways to avoid them. The first one is generalization. Generalization is making assumption about a whole group of people based on an inadequate sample. Okay, so for example, uh, my economic class is boring, and then my friend they say their economic class is boring too. Therefore, all economic class are boring. Okay, so the ways to avoid it is you need to draw a more modest conclusion by using the word some or many. The next one, false cause. False cause is drawing improper conclusion throughout sequencing. If A comes before B, then A causes B. Okay, for example, I studied biology last semester, and then this semester I'm taking organic chemistry, which is very confusing. So biology make chemistry confusing. Okay, the ways to avoid it is when making causal statements, be sure you can explain the process through which A causes B beyond their mere sequence. Next one, personalizations. Personalization is also known by their Latin names, homoin or ad homoin, or against the man, and to quoque or you too. Inserting personalities inappropriately into argument, common in political arguments. For example, I won't support the senior Smith education bill. He had a mistress and martial problems. So how to avoid it is you must focus on merits and supporting data of an argument, not on the personality or behavior of the people making the arguments. Next one, everyone does it. Everyone does it is justifying an issue based solely on the number of people involved. For example, a parents explain the evidence of risk they've been drinking. The child reject the argument saying, when you were my age, you drank too. It's healthy to drink only soda, millions of American kids do. So the ways to avoid it is the popular position is not always the right one. Be wary of arguments that rely exclusively on a set of numbers. Okay, next. Appealing to authority is using an endorsement from someone as a primary reason for supporting a point of view. For example, we should oppose higher thesis. Kurt Schilling does picture Kurt Schilling may be credible authority on baseball, but is he an authority on taxes? So how to avoid it is quoting authorities is valuable tool to build an argument. Make sure the authorities you quote are truly subject to the matter experts on the issue that you are discussing. The next one, weak analogy. Weak analogy is use relevant similarities in two objects to draw a conclusion. For example, cars and motorcycles are both driven at high speeds on highway. Car drivers aren't required to wear helmet, so motorcycle riders shouldn't have to wear it either. So how to avoid it is you can draw an analogy between just about any two objects or ideas. If you are using an analogy, make sure you identify the properties relevant to the argument you are making and see if both share those properties. Okay, the last one, false dichotomy, is setting up a situation which looks like there are only two possible options. If one option is discredited, the other one must be accepted. So for example, the classic example here is America, love it or leave it. Okay. How to avoid it? You must examine your own thinking. Are there really only two options? Look for the third options if you can. Just if you were asked to develop a compromise between two positions, what would it look like? What would its strengths and weakness be? Okay, that's all from me. Welcome, Ellen.
Jonathan. I would now like to talk about searching for aha. Firstly, creativity is inherited skill. So basically, creativity is not something people are born with, but it is a skill that is developed over time with consistent practice. And there are many people argue that the people you think were born creative because their parents also creative too. But you do know maybe they are creative from since their childhood. Secondly, creativity is free from thinking. While you may want to free yourself from all preconceived notions, it's recognizable structure to creative thinking. Rules and requirements do not limit creative thinking. It builds creative solutions wherever you face any problems. So creative thinking is coming out with new and original idea. It is the process of seeing the same things others see, but seeing them differently. So here are some tips for creative thinking. Firstly, feed your curiosity. Read at any time. Attend lecture. Because basically creative people make a habit of gather information because you will never know when you will put it to a good use. The more non-idea you have been exposed to, the more options you will have for combining them into new concepts. So next, develop your flexibility. By looking for second right answer, we have been conditioned to come out with the right answer from our school. But the reality is that there is often more than one right answer. Each option can be right depending on your point of view. Nextly, think metaphorically. It is useful to describe complex idea, and it is useful in making problems more familiar and in stimulating possible solutions. It will make your ability to work comfortably with metaphors takes practice. When you face with a problem, take time to think about metaphors to describe it and the desired solution. That's all from us today. Thank you.